When I was younger, around 12-ish, I really wanted to be a part of something kind of bigger than myself, or be a part of a community, or just be surrounded by what I thought it was like-minded people. And football, to a point, did that for me. Sports helped satiate that. I was kind of an outcast. We were super poor. And I remember I ended up gravitating towards these dudes that were like, there were three of them. There was like an 18, a 19, and a 20-year-old. And I don't know exactly how I fit in with them. It makes me very kind of suspicious now thinking on it as a grown man, but I think it's also because they knew that my mom smoked green and maybe they could get a hookup from her or something like that. I'm sure they had ulterior motives, but I remember one time, and everywhere they were the first ones to like get me drunk, which thinking back, that was super not cool, but it was what it was. And I thought I was cool drinking beers with these guys being all young. It felt like I was a part of something bigger. But one time when I was hanging out over at their house, we were all drinking like Budweiser or something crappy like that. And I remember I left to go to the bathroom and I came back and I drank down my drink, and it had these three little square pieces of tiny little paper in them. And I know now that that was blotter paper, but at the time I didn't really think of it. They were that like their house was kind of beat up, so I was like maybe something fell off the ceiling into my drink. It's whatever. And then I remember about 30 minutes later this feeling of extreme horrifying dread, something I had never ever felt before. And it just kept building and building and building. And then my vision started getting weird and distorted. And I started seeing things that I didn't know if they were actually there. I was seeing faces contort and colors changing in front of me. And it turns out that they had dosed me, and a pretty high dose too. And my 12-year-old brain was not built, nobody's is, to handle something like that. And it really, really broke me. I think to a point, besides also dealing with like SA and some abuse, hardcore abuse and stuff, I think that really set the tone for some of the mental problems I ended up having later down the line. And it just gave me this extreme PTSD. And now I still know that feeling. And if I start getting an anxiety attack, I'm like, oh, am I having a flashback? Is it happening again? Is my complete world about to melt in front of me and destroy me mentally? It was horrifying. I remember being so confused that I ran out into the woods for a little while, and I'm glad that I didn't get lost or something like that. And I remember a car saw me and they stopped, and I came out like because I was on the edge of the woods, and I came out and I came up to try to ask for help, and it was the school dare officer. And he was like, "What's going on? Something's going on with you." And once I realized who it was, I freaked out anymore and ran away. And I went back into these woods by a cow pasture, and I stayed there for a while. And there's when you're hallucinating, the darkness is the worst place that you could possibly be. And it's not even, you don't, there's not, it's not cartoon characters. It's not, things don't just like appear and dance around. It was just these vague, like abstract shapes and forms that were starting to become something that I couldn't possibly conceive. And the fear and the paranoia just built and built and built and built. And it almost broke me. I think to a small point, it did break me in a small way. But I've been able to like recover it. Definitely, like I said, it definitely gave me PTSD. I still think about it a lot. Sometimes I have nightmares about it. But I remember just wandering around in the woods for what felt like days, but it was just a few hours. And then I remember going, making my way back home and locking myself in the room, in my room, and just staring at a wall, just sobbing and just having a mental breakdown. And I was really good. There was one thing I was really good about hiding things from my mom, unfortunately, to a fault. And I just stayed in there and I felt messed up for days. Like, obviously, the hallucination stopped after like maybe like 5 or 6 hours, what felt like an eternity. But the feeling of like loss of mental control stayed with me for a while, and it was a really horrifying experience, and I never ended up talking to those guys again. No, that's not true. Actually, I ended up running into one of them my senior year when I was a big scary football player when I was like 17, and I was like, you have 3 seconds to get, I think it was at a football game or something like that, or like after a football game at like some kind of party, and I was like, you have 3 seconds to get away from me before something really really bad happens to you, man. And I meant it. I held such animosity and wanted vengeance for getting like mentally poisoned. They just did it for fun. They did it just to mess with me. They did it to entertain themselves. And they don't understand that they changed me in a small way for the rest of my life. And it messed me up. It took a long time to recover from that. And like I said, every time I got a little bit of anxiety, I started thinking, is everything about to start breaking down? What do I do? What do I do? I don't want this to happen again. And that's something that has stayed with me for, like I said, for a really long time. And that was not the worst thing that's ever happened to me, sadly, but it was something, like I said, that really stuck with me and gave me, there were things that happened to me when I was younger that made me like thirst for revenge. And that is an extreme mental poisoning. You do not want revenge and vengeance and getting back at somebody floating around in your head. It tears apart your very soul and can make you into a bad person. And yeah, it was something that really stuck with me, and I always think about that. And I just wonder what could make somebody want to do that to a kid just for entertainment. The world is a very dark and evil place in some ways, and hell on earth is real, and I've experienced it.